Okay, and now the conclusion of A View from a Hill by M.R. James. It was just as well that the squire had made that arrangement about a cold supper, Fanshawe thought, and not for the first time, as he wheeled his bicycle up the drive about 9 o'clock. So also the squire thought and said several times, as he met him in the hall, rather pleased at the confirmation of his want of faith in bicycles, than sympathetic with his hot, weary, thirsty, and indeed rather haggard friend. In fact, the kindest thing he found to say was, "You'll want a long drink tonight. Cider cup, do. All right. Hear that, Patton? Cider cup, iced, lots of it. Then to Fanshawe. Don't be all night over your bath." By 9:30 they were at dinner, and Fanshawe was reporting progress, if progress might be called. I got to Lambsfield very smoothly, and I saw the glass. It is very interesting stuff, but there's a lot of lettering I couldn't read. "Not with glasses," said the squire. "Those glasses of yours are no manner of use inside a church, or inside anywhere, I suppose, for that matter. But the only places I took 'em into were churches." "Well, go on," said the squire. "However, I took some sort of a photograph of the window, and I dare say an enlargement would show what I want. Then Wanston, I should think that stone was a very out-of-the-way thing, only I don't know about that class of antiquities. Has anybody opened the mound it stands on?
No.
If we wanted conclusive proof this man does not know he is in an M.R. James story, it is, has anyone tried opening the mound? Shall we just disturb this ancient tomb? Fuck is wrong with you?"
Or is this like the M.R. James cinematic universe? Oh my gosh.
There was an idea, and it was to leave old stuff the fuck alone. "Aren't you going to leave me your business card, Commander Fury? I will kill you if I see you near a church again. I will kill you." Leaves. Baxter wanted to, but the farmer wouldn't let him. "Oh, well, I should think it would be worth doing. Anyhow, the next thing was Fulnaker and... I've got those wrong, sorry. Baxter wanted to, but the farmer wouldn't let him." "Oh, well, I should think it would be worth doing. Anyhow, the next thing was Fulnaker and Oldbourne. You know, it's very odd about that tower I saw from the hill. Oldbourne Church is nothing like it, and of course there's nothing over 30 feet high at Fulnaker, though you can see it had a central tower. I didn't tell you that, did I? The Baxter's fancy drawing of Fulnaker shows a tower exactly like the one I saw." "So you thought, I dare say," put in the squire. "No, no, it wasn't a case of thinking. The picture actually reminded me of what I'd seen. And I made sure it was Oldbourne well before I looked at the title." "Well, Baxter had a very fair idea of architecture. I dare say what's left made it easy for him to draw the right sort of tower." "That may be it, but of course, but I'm doubtful if even a professional could have got it so exactly right. There is absolutely nothing left at Fulnaker but the bases of the piers which supported it. However, that isn't the oddest thing." "What about Gallows Hill?" said the squire. "Here, Patton, listen to this. I told you what Mr. Fanshawe said he saw from the hill." "Yes, Master Henry, you did, and I can't say I was much surprised, considering." All right, you keep that till afterwards. We want to hear what Mr. Fanshawe saw today. Go on, Fanshawe. You turn to come back by Ackford and Thorfield, I suppose."
Okay, that is so sus. He knows. The squire knows what the butler is going to tell
"Of
him,
course he does.
and he's being a drama queen about it.
You shut your peasant mouth. Conservatives are talking." "Yes, and I looked into both the churches. Then I got to the turning which goes to the top of Gallows Hill. I saw that if I wheeled my machine over the field at the top of the hill, I could join the home road on this side. It was about 6:30 when I got to the top of the hill, and there was a gate on my right, where it ought to be, leading into the belt of plantation. You hear that, Patton? A belt, he says. So I thought it was a belt, but it wasn't. You were quite right, and I was hopelessly wrong. cannot understand it. The whole top is planted quite thick. Well, I went on into this wood, wheeling and dragging my bike, expecting every minute to come to a clearing, and then my misfortunes truly began. Thorns, I suppose. First, I realized that the front tire was slack, then the back. I couldn't stop to do more than try to find the punctures and mark them, but even that was hopeless. So I plowed on, and the further I went, the less I liked the place. Not much poaching in that cover, eh, Paddon? Said the squire. No, indeed, Master Henry, there's very few cares to go. No, I know, never mind that now, go on, Fanshawe. I don't blame anybody for not caring to go there. I know I had all the fancies one least likes, steps crackling over twigs behind me, indistinct people stepping behind trees in front of me, and yes, even a hand laid on my shoulder. Got very sharp at that and looked round, but there was really no branch or bush that could have done it. Then, when I was just about at the middle of the plot, I was convinced that there was someone looking down on me from above, and not with any pleasant intent. Stopped again, or at least slackened my pace to look up, and as I did, down I came and barked my shin abominably on, what do you think? A block of stone, with a big square hole in the top of it, and within a few paces there were two others just like it. The three were set in a triangle. Now, do you make out what they were put there for? Think I can, said the squire, who was now very grave and absorbed in the story. Sit down, Patton. It was time, for the old man was supporting himself by one hand and leaning heavily on it. He dropped into a chair, and he said in a very tremulous voice, You didn't go between those stones, did you, sir? I did not, said Fanshawe emphatically. I dare say I was an ass, but as soon as it dawned on me where I was, I just shouldered my machine and did my best to run. It seemed to me as if I was in an unholy, evil sort of graveyard, and I was most profoundly thankful that it was one of the longest days, and still sunlight. Well, I had a horrid run, even if it was only a few hundred yards. Everything caught on everything. Handles and spokes and carrier and pedals caught in them viciously, or I fancied so. I fell over at least 5 times. At last I saw the hedge, and I couldn't trouble to hunt for the gate. There is no gate on that side, the squire interpolated. Just as well I didn't waste time then. I dropped the machine over somehow and went into the road pretty near head first. Some branch or something got my ankle at the last moment.
Uh-huh.
Anyhow, there I was, out of the wood, and seldom more thankful or more generally sore. Then came the job of mending my punctures. I had a good outfit, and I'm not still bad at the business, but this was an absolutely hopeless case. It was 7 when I got out of the wood, and I spent 50 minutes over one tire. As fast as I found a hole and put on a patch and blew it up, it went flat again, so I made up my mind to walk. That hill isn't 3 miles away, is it? Not more across country, nearer 6 by road. I thought it must be. I thought I couldn't have taken well over the hour over less. That's bad, sorry. I thought it must be. I thought I couldn't have taken well over the hour over less than 5 miles, even leading a bike. Well, there's my story. Where's yours and Patton's?
Yeah. I don't know what he encountered, but
Oh, a
yeah.
bush grabbed my ankle. No, something grabbed your ankle, sir.
Yes. All right, here we go.
Mine, I have no story, said the squire. But you weren't very far out when you thought you were in a graveyard. There must be a good few of them up there. Patton, don't you think? They left them there when they fell to bits, I fancy. Patton nodded, too much interested to speak. Don't, said Fanshawe. Now then, Patton, said the squire, you've heard what sort of a time Mr. Fanshawe's been having. What do you make of it? Anything to do with Mr. Baxter? Fill yourself a glass of port and tell us. Oh, that done me good, Master Henry, said Patton after absorbing what was before him. If you really wish to know what were in my thoughts, my answer would be clear in the affirmative. Yes, he went on, warming to his work. I should say, as Mr. Fanshawe's experience of today very largely due to the person you named, and I think, Master Henry, as I have some title to speak, and in view of me having been many years on speaking terms with him, and swore in to be jury on the coroner's inquest near this time 10 years ago, you being then, if you carry your mind back, Master Henry, travelling abroad, and no one here to represent the family. Inquest, said Fanshawe. An inquest on Mr. Baxter, was there? Yes, sir. On that very person. The fact as led up to that occurrence was these. The deceased was, as you may have gathered, a very peculiar individual in his habits. In my idea, at least, but all must speak as they find. He lived very much to himself, without neither chick nor child, as the saying is, and how he passed away his time was what very few could offer a guess at. He lived unknown, and few could know when Baxter ceased to be, said the squire to his pipe. I beg pardon, Master Henry, I was just coming to that. But when I say how he passed away his time, to be sure we know how intent he was in rummaging and ransacking out all the history of the neighbourhood, and the number of things he managed to collect together. Well, it was spoke of for miles round as Baxter's Museum. Many a time, when he might be in the mood, and I might have an hour to spare, have he showed me his pieces of pots and what not, going back, by his account, to the times of the ancient Romans. However,
Brits.
you know more about that than what I do, Master Henry. Only what I was a-going to say was this. As know what he might, and interesting as he might be in his talk, there was something about the man. Well, for one thing, no one ever remembered to see him in church, nor yet chapel at service time.
Scandal!
And that made talk. Our rector, he would never come in the house but once. Ever ask me what the man said? I'll do a better voice to the rector.
Hang on just a second. While you're at it, can you bring that mic just a touch closer to your mouth? We're getting a kind of a strange cutout effect where if you're silent for a moment, it kind of clips off the first word, and we don't want to lose any of your delightful accent.
How is that?
I'm sure it'll be fine. Let's keep going.
Great. Never asked me what the man said. That was all anybody could ever get out of him. Then how did he spend his nights, particularly about this season of the year? Time and again the labouring men would meet him coming back as they went out to their work, and he'd pass them by without a word, looking, they says, like someone straight out of the asylum. They see the whites of his eyes all around. He'd have a fish basket with him, and they noticed that he always comes the same road. And the talk got to be that he'd made himself some business, and that not the best kind. Well, not so far from where you was at 7 o'clock this evening, sir. Well, now, after such a night as that, Mr. Baxter, he'd shut up the shop, and the old lady that did for him had orders not to come in, and knowing what she did about his language, she took care to obey them orders. But one day it so happened, about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the house being shut up, as I said, there come a most fearful to-do inside, and smoke out the windows, and Baxter crying out seemingly in an agony. So the man as lived next door, he runs around to the back premises, and he bursts the door in, and several others come too. Well, he told me he never in all his life smelt such a fearful, odour as what there was in that kitchen place. It seemed as if Baxter had been boiling something in a pot and overset it on his leg, and there he laid on the floor trying to keep back the cries, but it was more than he could manage, and when he seen the people come in, he was in a nice condition. If his tongue weren't blistered worse than his leg, it wasn't his fault. Well, I picked him up, got him to a chair, run for the medical man, and one of them was going to pick up the pot, and Baxter, he screams out to let it alone. So he did, but he couldn't see as there was anything in the pot but a few old brown bones.
Oh my.
Then they says, Dr. Lawrence will be here in a minute, Mr. Baxter, he'll soon put you to rights, and then he was off again. He must got up to his room. Couldn't have the doctor come in there and see all that mess. They must throw a cloth over it, anything. The tablecloth out of the parlour or any of that. Or so they did, but that must have been poisonous stuff in that pot, for it was pretty near on 2 months before Baxter were about again. Beg pardon, Master Henry, was you going to say something? Yes, I was, said the squire. I wonder you haven't told me all this before. However, I was going to say I remember old Lawrence telling me he'd attended Baxter. He was a queer card, he said. Lawrence was up in the bedroom one day and picked up a little mask covered with black velvet, put it on in fun, and went to look at himself in the glass. He hadn't time for a proper look, for before old Baxter shouted to him from the bed, "Put it down, you fool! Do you want to look through a dead man's eyes?" And it startled him so much that he did put it down. And then he asked Baxter what he meant, and Baxter insisted on him handing it over and said the man he brought it from was dead, or some such nonsense. But Lawrence felt it as he handed it over, and he declared he was sure it was made out of the front of a skull. He bought a distilling apparatus at Baxter's sale, he told me, but he could never use it. It seemed to taint everything, however much he cleaned it. But go on, Patton.
Oh yeah, this totally sounds like necromancy. There's something unsavory.
Yes, Master Henry, I'm nearly done now, and time too, for I don't know what they'll think about me in the servants' hall. Well, this business of the scolding was some few years before Mr. Baxter was took, and he got about again and went on just as he'd used. And one of the last jobs he'd done was finishing up them actual glasses what you took out last night. You see, he'd made the body of them some long time, and got the pieces of glass for them, but there was something wanted to finish them, whatever it was. I don't know, but I picked up the frame one day, and I says, "Mr. Baxter, why don't you make a job of this?" And he says, when I've done that, you'll hear news. You will. There's going to be no such pair of glasses as mine when they're filled and sealed. And then he stopped, and I says, "Why, Mr. Baxter, you talk as if they was wine bottles, filled and sealed. Why, where's the necessity for that?" "Did I say filled and sealed?" he says. "Oh, well, I was suiting my conversation to make company. Well then, come round this time of year, and one fine evening I was passing his shop on my way home, and he was standing on the step, very pleased with himself, and he says, 'All right and tight now, my best bit of work's finished, and I'll be out with 'em tomorrow.' 'What, finished those glasses?' I says. 'Might I have a look at 'em?' 'No,' he says, 'I put 'em to bed for tonight, and when I do show 'em you, you'll have to pay for peeping, so I tell you.' And that, gentlemen, were the last words I heard that man say. That was the 17th of June, and just a week after there was a funny thing happen, and it was due to that as we brought in Unsound Mind at the inquest. For barring that, no one has knew Baxter in business could anyways have laid that against him, but George Williams has lived in the next house, and do now, he was woke up that same night with a stumbling and tumbling about in Mr. Baxter's premises, and he got out of bed and he went to the front window on the street to see if there was any rough customers about, and it being a very light night, he could make sure as there was not. So he stood and he listened, and he hears Mr. Baxter coming down his front stair, one step after another, very slow. And he got the idea as it was like someone being pushed or pulled down and holding on to everything he could. Next thing he hears the street door come open, and out come Mr. Baxter into the street in his day clothes, hat and all, with his arms straight down by his sides, and talking to himself, and shaking his head from one side to the other, and walking in that peculiar way that he appeared to be going, as it were, against his own will. George Williams put up the window. and he heard him say, "Oh, mercy, gentlemen," and then he shut up sudden as if he said someone clapped his hand over his mouth, and Mr. Baxter threw his head back and his hat fell off, and William see his face looking something pitiful, so as he couldn't keep from calling out to him, "Why, Mr. Baxter, ain't you well?" And he was going to offer to fetch Dr. Lawrence to him, only he heard the answer, "'Tis best you mind your own business. Put in your head." But whether it was Mr. Baxter said it so hoarse-like and faint, he could never be sure. Still, there weren't no one but him in the street, and yet Williams was that upset by the way he spoke that he shrank back from the window, and he went and he sat on the bed. And he heard Mr. Baxter's steps go on and up the road, and after a minute or more he couldn't help but look out once more, and he sees him going along the same curious way as before, and one thing he recollected was that Mr. Baxter never stopped to pick up his hat when it fell off, and yet there it was on his head. Well, Master Henry, that was the last anybody see of Mr. Baxter, at leastways for a week or more. There was a lot of people said he was called off on business or made off because he got into some scrape. But he was well known for miles around, and none of the railway people nor the public house people hadn't seen him. And then ponds was looked into and nothing found, and last one evening Fakes the keeper come down from over the hill to the village, and he says he seen the gallows hill planting black with birds, and that were a funny thing, because he never seen no sign of a creature there in his old time. So they looked at each other a bit. And then the first one says, "Well, I'm going to go up." And another says, "So am I if you are." And half a dozen of them set off in the evening time and took Dr. Lawrence with him. And you know, Master Henry, there he was, between them 3 stones, with his neck broke. Useless to imagine the talk which this story set going. It is not remembered. But before Paddon left them, he said to Fanshawe, "Excuse me, sir, but I did understand as you took out them glasses with you today. I thought you did. Might I ask, did you make use of them at all?" "Yes, only to look at something in the church." "Oh, indeed. You took 'em into the church, did you, sir?" "Yes, I did. It was Lambsfield Church. By the way, I left them strapped onto my bicycle, I'm afraid, in the stable yard." "No matter for that, sir. I can bring them in the first thing tomorrow, and perhaps you'd be so good as to look at 'em then." Accordingly, before breakfast, after a tranquil and very well-earned sleep, Fanshawe took the glasses into the garden and directed them to a distant hill. He lowered them instantly, looked at top and bottom, worked the screws, tried them, and yet again shrugged his shoulders and replaced them on the hall table. "Pattern," he said, "they're absolutely useless. I can't see a thing. It's as if someone had stuck a black wafer over the lens." "Spoil my glasses, have you?" said the squire. "Thank you, they're the only ones I've got." "Try them yourself," said Fanshawe. "I've done nothing to them." So after breakfast, the squire took them out to the terrace and stood on the steps, and after a few ineffectual attempts, "Lord, how heavy they are," he said impatiently, and in the same instant dropped them on the stones. The lenses splintered, and the barrel cracked, and a little pool of liquid formed on the stone slab. It was inky black, and the odour that rose from it is not to be described. "Filled and sealed, eh?" said the squire. "If I could bring myself to touch it, I dare say we should find the seal. So that's what's come of his boiling and distilling, is it, old ghoul?" "What do you mean?" "Don't you see, my good man? Remember what he said to the doctor about looking through dead men's eyes? Well, this was another way of it. They didn't like having their bones boiled, I take it. And the end of it was they carried him off whither he would not. Well, I'll get a spade and we'll bury this thing decently. As they smoothed the turf over, the squire, handing the spade to Patton, who had been a reverential spectator, remarked to Fanshawe, "It's almost a pity you took that thing into the church. You might have seen more than you did. Baxter had them for a week, I make out, but I don't see that he did much in the time." "I'm not sure," said Fanshawe. "There is that picture of Fulnaker Priory Church."